or dialogue or pathways. We may have a variety of language games that are in our mind and we recall. Or we may think of different persons. We may have a way of remembering by thinking of Astrid, or thinking of Natalie, or thinking of Saji, or thinking of Josie, or Thomas, or Serena, or Miriam, or Juta, or Raphael. These names that I just said, we all can remember what we heard them say. So remembering names, but I'd like to suggest an image, a place, that as we go forward, we remember that there was a place called the Upper Room. The Upper Room. What do we know about the Upper Room? We know that Jesus, before celebrating the Last Supper with the disciples, hired people to prepare the Upper Room. This was something that he had in mind. The scriptures tell us that the Master has instructed for things to be, preparations to be taken. They're invited, the disciples are invited to the Upper Room. They arrive in the Upper Room and are welcomed by Jesus, who then disrobes and washes their feet and teaches them how to be humble and how to be hospitable. And so that they remember that lesson, he breaks the bread and drinks from the cup and shares the bread and shares the cup. And in doing that, calls them to remember these actions as they go forward. In that upper room, they are having these experiences that they never had before. As they adjourn, they go to the garden, and then arrest will occur, and then a trial will occur, and then a crucifixion will occur, and then they will disperse. But the scriptures tell us that the disciples continuously return to the upper room. Luke says this, Matthew says this, John says this. They all keep going back to the upper room where they had this encounter with Jesus and they gathered together. What are they doing in the upper room? I suggest that in the upper room, they're grieving. They're grieving. They're shocked. They need one another in a way they didn't need one another before the death of Jesus. They realize that they need one another. So as they grieve, they listen to one another and they begin to share. And they begin to understand one another in a way they didn't before. I was talking to Natalie Beckwad about the upper room, and she said to me, you know, it's really key to understand that they entered the upper room as individuals, but they left as a community, as the people of God. They left the upper room. They were constituted by their grieving in that upper room, by becoming a people in a way that the gospel keeps telling us that they never got along before the death of Jesus. When did they learn to get along? I suggest in the upper room. That's what synodality is about, learning to get along, learning to become connected. And they have these experiences of grief, but as they learn to listen, as they learn to understand one another, they begin to be able to take new steps and encounter a new freedom. What happens? New members enter the room. It's no longer just the 12. In fact, they're just 11. What will happen is, we know the Magdalene has enormous influence on the upper room. She's been the first witness to the resurrection. She's been instructed by the risen Christ to report to my disciples. And that they're gathered in the upper room. They even report back, and Luke tells us this. They report back to others who come to them. When the disciples from Emmaus come to say that they've seen the Lord, they say, well, you know, we've already heard. We've heard from Mary Magdalene. There's a sense that she's present there. We know when we hear about the Pentecost that Mary, the mother of Jesus, is there. Women are in the upper room. They were not there, maybe they were, before at the Last Supper. But we do know definitively that after the death of Jesus, as the church is being configured, women are there. And one of them has been commissioned to instruct the disciples about the resurrection of Jesus. Something new is happening as they're being configured through grief. And in this grieving and in this newness, Christ appears. Christ appears and allows himself to be seen as risen and to be engaged. And at the very end, he tells them that the Spirit will come. And it's that sense It's not so much that the Spirit is going to descend. The Spirit's been there. Since the moment that Jesus prepared the upper room is the place where the Spirit would be. It's just that they finally are able to recognize the upper room. And what do they need to do? Now they need to leave the upper room. Now that they've been constituted, they need to go to the far ends of the earth. I'm sure that when Thomas came here, he thought of that upper room. When James went to Spain, he thought of the upper room. The upper room became for them, I think, a place where they encountered Jesus in a whole new way, by the breaking of the bread and by the washing of the feet, that they encountered one another in a whole new way, that they encountered women in a way that they never imagined, that they encountered, if you will, the possibility of being church, and were able then to go out and do this. Here we've been at DBK, at Dharmaram. This has been our upper room. This has been the place where we came as individuals and we leave connected. Those names that I rattled off in the beginning are people that we will remember. But as we go forward, we have to go forward as they did, with Horatio, as the Archbishop told us, with a new heightened way of speaking, a capacity to be able to speak with the Spirit, from the Spirit, with one another, about a new way, a new order. We need to remember that when the disciples were in that upper room, they decided to change. They actually decided that they had to replace one of the disciples, one of the apostles. And in doing that, taught us and somehow began to institutionalize the role of apostle in a way that wasn't there beforehand. They'll later be able to select deacons. They'll be able to imaginatively consider what constitutes leadership in the church. This is what we're called to do. We're called, with a new Pharisee, in light of this wonderful experience here, to realize that we've been in the upper room, provided by a hell of a lot of CMIs, who took care of us and welcomed us and taught us what hospitality was, so that we could go and do likewise. Thank you.